أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. So for the last couple of weeks we have been studying the verse which is mentioning that everything is within the control of the Creator. So there was an emphasis on this everything. So for example, if I start by asking to you, since these guys we were together with them before, so let's have a conversation with you first.
Sure.
So when Quran is claiming that everything is under God's control, so what does this imply to you?
To me, the way that I would see it is that God's constantly destroying and recreating the universe in like these different slices, right? And so anything that we do is by the agency of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like I would see it as within the realms of like I have the intention to look at this page. That can only be realized if Allah says in the next iteration of his creation that he's going to say, yeah, this page is going to go up, and yeah, it's going to go up, and that he has sunnah in that his sunnah is to let the laws of physics kind of dictate how it goes up, how my intention kind of moves forth, but he also can deviate from that, and that's my understanding. Like for example, how miracles work. So everything is realized within his like tendencies of to create the universe within the realms of the laws of physics based on the previous iteration. But that's all by his will.
I see. Very good. So what make you arrive to that conclusion?
Because we're held accountable. So we have to have some sort of agency, but also that agency can be blocked or negated because Allah is all powerful. So everything that could be done or couldn't be done, he could realize and stop or allow or prohibit. And so there has to be some sort of level of like supervision, but then also allowing that agency to go. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yes, but maybe I'm more questioning the first part of it, not our agency part of it, but the first part of it. So how do we know that he is controlling everything? So how can we arrive to this conclusion? Because Quran is certainly claiming that God has control over everything, but it's a claim at the end of the day. So how do I know that this is really the case?
I think fundamentally we like just from that claim we need some kind of like prerequisites to build up to that. So for example, there is like the proof of like an all-powerful God that's competent over everything, right? And there has to be, right, for the universe to follow a certain so if there's like a possibility of two things happening, right? Like either my hand goes up or my hand goes down, right? There has to be some like something that's dependent on, right? And that dependency, a neuroscientist would say is like the axons firing in my head, right? These synapses. And then so then what's that dependency? Well, the laws of physics, right? The electricity dissipating down the neurons, right? Well, then what's that dependent on? And you keep tracing it back, and it has to be some source, right? And the source has to be of nothing that we can understand, because everything that we understand has to have some source, has to have some cause, has to have some cause. So leading back, there has to be something that's not familiar to us in nature, right? And I would say that then has to be competent over everything, right? Because if everything has a source, it has to lead back to something. So there's two possibilities, right? It's either that each kind of cause has one ultimate, like, I mean, has one like ultimate other nature cause, right? So for example, the movement of my hand has one, and then something outside the wind has another, right? That's one possibility, or they all feed back to the same thing. So then the question of if it fed back to something different comes, okay, what happens when those come into interaction, right? So if I go outside and the movement of my hand has to do with the interaction of the wind, I'm swatting or something, right? Well, then if you have two independent otherworldly things that are not of the nature, then which one takes precedent over the other in this case? And then all of a sudden, once that you've done that, you've established rank between them. And once that you establish rank between them, considering that all things could have some sort of interaction or possibility, you must have one ultimate ranking thing, right?
Mhm.
And so then that would be the creator. And does my logic make sense now?
It does. But then how about this chain reaction? So because when we talk about chain, then as if creator or God in this scenario is being the first causer.
Mhm.
He's not being directly controlling everything.
Mhm.
So there are being a lot of intermediaries. But as if the verse is claiming that he controls everything.
Yeah. So when I say, so that's where I would say kind of there's a difference between the way that something's actually happening and the way that we simplistically kind of look at the world in our paradigm. So we like to see it as like a chain reaction of, okay, the electricity is dissipating down the neuron, which is firing in the synapse, which is allowing a neurotransmitter to go, and then I can look at my hand right through, like, and then it's interacting with gravity, right? We like to view it as a chain.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it's easy for us to understand, and looking at it from an entirely different discussion. This could be because also Joel wants us to be able to understand our world, and this is the most convenient way to do so. But each of those independent things God has competency over. So one we can view as, and again, this comes back to the son of the law. If we say that if A causes B, then repeatedly doing A, we can say that within the realm of physics, within the sunnah, that we can continually expect B, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, he has competency over both, such that if he willed it such that we did A and B was not to occur, that's possible. But within us realizing in everyday life, there's this dependency between A over B, and that has to do with the tendency of our understanding. I don't want to say habit, but do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But still, I'm trying to find a way to, because this is what we have been studying. When I look at, let's say, just one, let's say 2 chain. So
Mhm.
there's this long chain.
Mhm.
I'm just looking at 2 of the, what did I say?
Links.
Links, yeah, 2 of the links. So by just looking at them, is there a way for me to say that this cannot do that?
What do you mean?
So for example, let's give a simple example. Yeah, a neurotransmitter it's being too much detail, but
Yeah.
say something in front of our eyes. Let's say you drink water and you get quenched.
Mm-hmm.
So this sort of a relation, because each and every time I drink water, I'm getting quenched.
Mm-hmm.
So can water quench me?
So I would say that's that path has been set up so that we can expect some things, that we can learn from something, and that we can then initiate it. So
yeah,
in most of the circumstances,
Mhm.
I'm saying that if you drink water, this is going to be the outcome. That if this happens, then he will create it like this, and he can also recreate the universe so that you're the one drinking water, and that this is this dependency that we've come to expect. But really, if you look behind the scenes, under the hood, not under the hood, whatever, it's happening such that each of the actions, you drinking water and you becoming quenched, however that mechanism is of you becoming quenched, is entirely dependent upon him. He's causing both of them to happen, but he's not causing one in the reaction of the other because he's not compelled by you drinking water, but he's ultimately responsible for the quenching of the water. But it happens such that in most cases, you drinking water will cause the quenching. Not you drinking water will cause the quenching. He will cause the quenching in response to you drinking water. Does that make sense?
I mean, in that line, yes.
Mhm.
But still, why am I trying to explain it with a he? This part that, for example, if I can explain quenching and water
Mhm.
without referring to the creator, a creator,
Mhm.
why would I bother myself with trying to make a case so that I will try to explain it with God? So is it not possible to do it otherwise, so that this is being the only way of explaining it?
Well, when you simplify it and look at it kind of in this isolation of every single time that you drink water every single time you're quenched, and you look at that in isolation. No, you don't need it. But we don't exist. We don't look at these things in isolation. We look at them in the broader context of life, right? So there has to be some mechanism by which you're drinking water and you're getting quenched, right? There's some in between, right? There's some physics and some chemistry and some biology going on under the hood, right? We say, okay, so then what's the dependency of that? What's the dependency of that? So it's all these things interacting, and they all have to be dependent on something else. And again, that traces back to God. Does that make sense? So if we say like there's a very simple machine that you drink water, you're quenched like that, then no, there's no need for some explanation. But that's also inherently creating a picture without the creator. Do you see what I'm saying? To say that this is something that happens, and then you always expect the other. Do you get me? And that's not the reality.
Yeah. So then, since the machinery mechanism in the existence is so much intermingled.
Well, not that it's intermingled. You could have this simple system, but it still has to be dependent on something else. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's the continual dependency. I would say that kind of proves that there needs to be some.
Yeah. So I'm trying to see by this continual dependency, without going to the chain, how we can solve the problem. Because I'm trying to see without going to the chain if we can tackle the problem or not. Because
I'm sure there's more than one way to look at everything being dependent on the creator. This is one proof, I think. In terms of, so sorry, what did you have in mind?
So last week we were studying. So in general, the way that we are trying to do since the beginning of these discussions were like, if I can explain the existence or whatever phenomena that I'm experiencing within itself, then I don't need to talk about God anyways, because if, let's say, who brought this cookie here, if I can say that, okay, there's somebody in the room which can bring it, then if somebody says, no, God brought it, I would say, well, I mean, there's already an explanation. Why are you bringing another unnecessary thing into the picture?
Mm-hmm.
So then we are trying to understand what's going on in the existence. So pretty much like you were doing. So how does the thing happen? And in general, the methodology that we were trying to follow was as being exemplified in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So, because in his story, also in our real life story, I observe that I live, but how do I live? I don't have a share in my life, like as you were saying. I don't know how I'm raising my hand. I don't know how my heart is pumping. So these are the things that are happening out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
But also they are happening within an order. So I guess the order part is important. As you said, I cannot take it in isolation, just saying that, okay, hydrogen or sodium and potassium pump is working this way, not within the isolation, but it's like a whole system which is making me live like this. So certainly with my own experience, I know that it requires a good deal of knowledge to put things into order, plus some power, but used within an order, certain order. But I have no share in that because I don't know how I'm breathing, how I'm cleaning up my blood, any of these, I don't know. Then who does? So this becomes our question. If it's not me, then who does it?
Mm-hmm.
So for the last 2 weeks, we were especially going through living beings, because living beings are like the most complex organism or most complex machinery in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And as if for you to live or I to live, pretty much the rest of the universe needs to be as it is, since things are apparently so much related to each other. But then, what does it? And if it's not me, then what does it? This was our starting point.
Mm-hmm.
One possibility that we considered was maybe it is my particles. Because at the end of the day, I'm consisting of particles.
Mm-hmm.
Let it be atoms or subatomic particles. Let's call it particle, the smallest undivisible thing that you can imagine. Then what would happen? What would be required for the particles to do it?
So I'm hesitant with plurality of this ultimate causing thing, right? So I would say we want to take like a kind of this is going down like a scientific line, right? Or like not scientific because not that religion is not scientific, but going down this like explanatory based on like the laws of physics type thing, right? Well, we could say that the particles are doing something, but how are they doing it? Why are they doing it, right? So, for example, the quarks have to assemble into protons and electrons have to assemble into, right? And they're ultimately the things doing something, but why are they doing it? Why are they bonding the way they are, right? There has to be some sort of rule. So if we want to separate it from a creator, we could say that there has to be some sort of law governing it, right? And there has to be some sort of universal law governing it. Some sort of like, not that it has to be written out, but we could think about it as like a book of like, okay, this is going to interact with this. What's the case for that? And every single case has to be predetermined and decided for how, not predetermined. Every single possible case has to have some solution with how it's dealt with, right? This particle comes in contact with this particle moves up and down. There has to be some reason for that and something to do when that happens, right? Governing it, right? So there has to be some ultimate set of principle, and it has to be consensusized and universal, such that if there's some sort of rule for this particle and some other sort of rule for this particle, then what happens when they interact? Well, there has to be some sort of dominating rule, right? So if we want to take it away from this conscious being, that's what I would have to say. There has to be an ultimate, right?
And this is one way to say it, or the other alternative is every single particle needs to agree upon the same thing simultaneously.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every single second or every single moment of existence.
Yes.
Right? So, and this is what's happening in this body. So, for example, this eye is a organism in itself, but the particle, let's say some particle comes and sits to my eye, and it starts functioning properly so that I can now see you. But also, my eye has a position in my head. So it's not that if this particle is an expert of eye, let's say, it's not sufficient because this particle needs to know how the eye is located and functioning with respect to the rest of the head. And likewise, for the rest of the body, my body is, again, related to the rest of the universe, like the whole ecosystem and whatnot. Or my eye is functioning with relative to the stars and the sun. So it needs to know all about this stuff. So as if this particle to move here, it needs to know everything in existence.
Yeah, or at least there needs to be some case for everything to an existence. So one could make the argument that particle is not directly interacting with some other particle billions of light years away or millions of light years away, however large the universe is. But it could, right? And so there needs to be some case for that, right? It happened to interact with your eye. There needs to be some case for that. And there needs, like you said, to be some consensus or agreement, some positive case for that, some infinitely large guiding rule for any possible interaction between any fundamental thing, be it particle or force in the universe.
Yeah.
And so we explain that with a conscious, all-powerful being, right? And I think that you would need some other sort of paradigm to kind of explain that that's a being and not some set of like fundamental rules ingrained within the universe. And those proofs don't exist. They do exist. I just don't know how woven in there to this.
So in this case, another impossibility would be, let's say, for each particle, now I am assuming that such a vast knowledge is required for every single particle. But not only that, they need to be, because the question about this, agreed upon consensus, as you were saying, the law, an agreed upon law, since every single particle is independent of each other, there is no common ground for them. For example, we say that there is a common sense. For example, in this room, if it is called common sense, says that we are a cloth. But there's a common sense because you are being obliged to obey some rules, and I'm being obliged to obey the same rules because we are not independent really of the existence. Somebody or something is dictating a rule over us. But now in the case that we are saying that maybe it's the particles themselves, so then that means they are totally independent in and of themselves. So why should there be any law? Because the idea of law means there must be something superior to all of them, which is going to dictate a common law for all of them. So there needs to be a common truth, but there's no common truth. This is why there needs to be a dynamic, every moment agreement of what is to be done in the next moment. So,
Yeah.
and what that requires is everybody, each of those particles would say that, for example, if we were 10 people in here, I would say, you 9, you stay there, you sit over here, you jump out of the window, all of them, because this is my truth, my definition of proper way of existence. Yet, 9 of you would give me a command as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I am superior or giving command to 9 of you. At the same time, I am receiving command from 9 of you. I am both a king and also like the laws, because I'm receiving command. So this sort of a contradiction needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this, like, it's not hard, but it's like a contradictory statement. All-knowing, all-powerful, yet very weak to receive command from everybody.
Yeah, which is why this law, whatever we call it to be, needs to be otherworldly, in the sense that all the understandings that we have of like particles, for example, is that they're dependent upon something. So the ultimate thing that guides the action of these particles and their tendencies must be not like the particles, and not composed of the particles, and not. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So whether it's a law or a being, it needs to be not of the same way that we understand
Yes.
the universe, which implies some otherness.
Yeah, exactly. So in here, then we are saying that it cannot be particles. It doesn't make sense. So if it's not particles, then what? So we keep asking. So let's say we say it's a law. But what is a law? Then we start questioning. Can a law do an action? Because it is as if this idea of law is a vague thing. We don't really know what we mean when we say laws are doing action. Because, for example, when we say it is gravity that makes this, so what is gravity? Is it like a cloud that covers everything in here, which is pulling down? Or so I guess the idea of maybe law needs to be questioned in here.
Yeah, so I would say, taking that approach, if it's some sort of law, is that we could understand the law as some like fabric of the universe, some thread running through the universe that governs all of the interactions, and this law would have to be infinite in its capacity to judge any possible interaction between particles, or because any possible thing could happen, and it has to have some outcome for that particle for the universe to move forward. So we think of gravity then as one possible end case of that law. So the law is threaded through this universe. It's otherworldly, like we said, because it can not be dependent upon anything, because then that would then be the law, right? And so we need something at the end that's not dependent upon anything. So that law would be like just a property of the universe, or maybe the dominating factor of the universe, some property of the universe, right? And we would say that it's running through this room. So when your phone drops, that's because the property of the universe is saying that these particles interact with the particles of the Earth, such that there's a force between them and it moves down. Do you see what I'm saying? At every instantaneous moment. So that law, if it was a law, would have to be some like inherent woven thing through
But in general, because when we say this law, does law do anything? This is a question that maybe we should ask first.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe law is not the right word, but it's a response mechanism, right? So again, we said that there needs to be some possible solution for every single case. So we would say that compilation of responses, however large, and I would argue that it has to be infinitely large, is something that exists within the universe, right? This is not the stance I'm taking. I'm saying if we want to take the approach of a law, right, that it's this set of end cases, right, such that whenever any we can think of it as the laws of physics, right? For example, so whenever any possible thing happens, based on what the law says, would be the response, right? So a proton and an electron collide towards each other. the laws say that negative charges attracts the electron, starts flying around the proton, right?
Mhm.
Or on a larger scale, right, you drink water and the law says that this happens, that you get quenched, right? And so then that's what happens. The only problem with a law philosophy, not the only problem. One problem with a law philosophy is that exceptions are not possible, right? If we say that this is the inherent property of the universe and it is unchanging, not that that it's unchanging, is that there's no miracles, right? There's no deviation from the standards,
So
right?
before going to the miracles part,
Mhm.
let's say there's this glass
Mhm.
and there's the light. So light is coming, and let's say photon is coming to the glass, and it's reflecting and refracting. So
Mhm.
this photon, let's say this one, the lucky one, so it came in with a certain angle, so it's now refracting into the glass according to some laws of optics. So who is doing this action? Now let's analyze the case. According to our first line of thought with the particles, so the interacting parties in here are photon, glass. So either the photon and glass, like photon comes to the glass and knows that, okay, this is glass, so I should go this way. Or if the deciding mechanism is the photon, or if it is the glass, which says, okay, I am a transparent object, but still you need to change when you interact with me. So you go like this. So, and this goes back to each and every time they need to behave in the same way. And then if we don't take it in this isolation, uh, analyze it in the larger scale of the existence, we said that for that to happen, each particle needs to know everything and have control over everything. If this is not the case, then how about the law? What do we mean that the law is making it? Because these are the two agents that are acting over here. When we say law is doing as if it's not the two, there's a third agent, but the third agent is not, it's an abstract concept really, it's not really an entity. So what do we mean when we say an abstract entity is doing the action? But again, as you were saying, law needs to be part of this universe, not from outside of universe.
So
yeah, what does that mean?
the phrase that the law is making it happen makes the law seem embodied, right? It makes it seem like it has these physical properties in the same way that we observe from a photon and a proton and a human being and a self, right? Whereas when we say that the law is the set of all responses to all possible outcomes, we're saying that based on the law. So there's no push, right? That the photon extends over here. It's simply that the law is a property of the universe, and you could think of it as an overarching umbrella that's guiding the universe, regardless of whether it's external or internal. It's causing things in the universe to happen, such that not causing things in the universe to happen. That it's a set of responses for any possible thing in the universe that could happen for the next step to happen. So there's nothing pushing the photon this way or this way, but it's that the law states when this interaction happens because it must respond to all possible interactions. This is the response, and so it happens, right? There's no push, but it's the property of the universe that every single possible.
Then who makes the decision, though?
So that's the question: is does there need to be a decision, right? So if I
because photon comes to the glass, and next frame, either it's going to stop there, it's going to either go this way, that way, some sort of a decision needs to be made in there. So who makes that decision?
It's like a cause and reaction in that the photon interaction with the glass is the cause and the reaction is the photon bouncing off. The reaction would be like what you index looking at the law. And again, I'm kind of describing it as this book for simplicity of understanding, but we would say that it's like, right, the interaction between the glass and the photon, there's nothing causing it to go in the next case. It's just that because the universe is compiled in the way that it is, and people talk, for example, physicists talk about the different universal constants, right? For example, Newton's law of gravity has, big G, and then there's like Planck's constants, these different things that describe the way that the universe behaves how it does, right?
Mhm.
These set of factors result in a reaction to any possible interaction. So because of those inherent properties of the universe, which are not of the agents of the universe, like photons, protons, electrons, particles, and forces, right? That this would be the reaction because of their interaction. Sorry.
So I'm trying to understand the way that we know of laws. For instance, let's say red light means stop, or green light means go. So when you're driving your car and when you see a red light, it's not that you immediately stop or you are being stopped, or I don't know, however the law is rendering you to stop. I mean, not like that. But knowing that there's this law, so you say that, okay, now I am abiding by this law and I am stopping. So in this case, for instance, you are being the agent to choose to stop according to a law.
Mm-hmm. So it's dangerous to draw analogies and say that this is how it works in one situation. This is how it has to work in another situation. I'm saying this is a property of the universe insofar that when something happens, this will be the outcome, right? That's so you're saying how does it move forward then?
Mhm.
So from frame to frame, how does it move forward? Is that every interaction at any within the universe, it's finite, right? Or at least our understanding is that it's finite and expanding, right?
Mhm.
That's the scientific consensus. Is that at like one frame shot of the universe, right? You have many interactions happening, right? And you could count all those interactions and look at this planet's moving towards this planet, and then very small this proton's interacting with this proton, and there's all these different interactions, right? And every single one of those interactions, based on the law, has to have some sort of reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then in the next phase of the universe, whatever that time step is, you would have the associated reaction for every single action, and then reevaluate, okay, now what is reacting, and move forward and forward. And when I say, I think the difficulty with our understanding is that when I say you react to that, it makes it seem like there's some force making it happen. Whereas I'm saying from this perspective, and again, I'm not, yeah, the idea would be that it's just happening because this is the property of the universe. This is how it will happen based on the reactions.
Then, because the example that I think of for this one, or the way that we are actually driving, how do we come up with the idea of laws? Because we see a pattern repeating, and we say that there's a law, and law is making it as if this is being our understanding. Each and every time we see that this is dropping, and we say that there's a certain pattern for that, and we give it a name, gravity, and we say this law is making it as if, or law is forcing it to happen, however you would like to word it. To me, this sounds very much like, let's say, I'm your neighbor, I am observing you for 10 years. Every morning you wake up at 6, then you take a short run for half an hour, come back, take a shower, have your breakfast, then take your newspaper, go work, come back at 6 p.m. Every day for 10 years, I observe that this is what you do. Then I start entertaining the idea that this is law of Cameron, and and let's say she asks me, how does this happen? I say, simple, it is the law of Cameron. This is how it happens, because this is how it happened for the last 10 years. How I come up with this idea was observing the pattern, but still I am speaking or imagining as if something is forcing you, some invisible thing is forcing you to act in this way. But is this, because definitely there are choices being made each and every day, and maybe it's the same for 10 years, there's no exception. Still, this is a knowledge, like knowing the pattern is one thing, but still the pattern itself, as if I am imagining, it is the one that makes the decisions and that also runs the decisions. Same thing applies to how we observe in the existence. So we see a pattern, And we say that gravity is doing it, or the laws of optics is doing it. But still, the question mark that is missing is who is making the or running the decisions? What or who is running the decisions? Because from there we jump again back to, if it's particles, then we already talked. Then if it's not particles, then what sort of an imaginary law that I am thinking of, which is like, because it needs to be part of existence, still I am considering things are happening within here. Then, yeah.
So I guess the way to think about it is, again, go back to like the fabric analogy, right? Of like this law is something permeating the universe, not in the way that a physical entity would, or that a force would, or that a photon would, but it's permeating the universe, right? And so every time that two particles interact, they're surrounded by this law, and they interact with the law such that the reaction happens. Now you're saying, how does that interaction with the law work? Mm-hmm. And that's why I think you kind of get infinite regression with that. So I
as if now we are imagining either those law are even smaller particles, or it is just a single entity which covers everywhere in the existence.
I would say it has to be like other, to get to the principal law, like we could say there's a primary law and then a secondary law and the tertiary law that influences how that law interacts. That at some point there has to be one on which there is no dependency, right? And
so I guess the problem with this line of thought is, with the things that we observe in existence, we cannot come to any conclusion or any satisfying explanation with that line of thought. Because as long as I say that this existence happens through something within the existence, and the law is something within the existence, I cannot come up with an explanation. This is why I would say either the explanation of law is just a name that I am as if blinding myself, like saying that you are acting because of the law, not that you are acting with your own will, you are each and every day making these choices, but that the law is forcing you, as if this, I am putting it into my mind, or like this glass, I'm putting it in front of my eyes and trying to interpret it like this, although it doesn't have any external existence out there. So
why does the law have to be internal? Why can't it be something externally that dictates the universe, because the universe is within the law? Do you see what I'm saying? So then the law would be something on which there's no dependency because it is outside of existence but influencing existence. Do you see what I'm saying?
Then I would say I need to expand the definition of law then. Mm-hmm. Because if I go outside of existence, then things are all changing. But because I'm trying to explain, first of all, the existence within existence. Mm-hmm. And if I can, like I was saying, that how about these cookies? If I can find a cause in this room for this cookie, I don't need to go outside.
Mm-hmm. So before we go circular, I think we're in agreement that you can't explain every interaction within existence within existence, because as you said, then you need some explanation for that. That's within existence, which needs some sort of dependency, right? That you had said one point before, right? So you sorry, finish.
So for the dependency part, I'm trying to avoid going to this chain and saying that at the end I need a dependence. I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to see right now for any interaction, I need to be able to explain it. This is why I don't want to go all the way to the beginning of time or like this causal chain, but trying to see how this thing right now is happening. That's what I'm trying to see. And for that, one possibility was particles, and it looks like it's as if I need to assume infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite will for every particle, which take us to this contradiction. Then the idea of laws, again, within existence, I don't experience such a thing that laws are acting. Laws are sort of knowledge. If you just say that it's a law in terms of you act upon it, but there needs to be some chooser, actor acting upon a law. But without this, then the law itself is just like an abstract concept which doesn't act.
Mhm. So I don't agree that you can ignore the chain, because by your logic, you're saying that you're trying to look at this interaction, this single interaction at a time, right? That you don't want to go up the chain, right? So you're saying that you want to find the explanation for that interaction, right? Well, that's inconclusive then, right? You find the explanation for that interaction, then what do? We need to reanalyze that explanation. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you look at something like one interaction, you can ignore everything for the time being, and I would say that it's good to ignore everything for the time being, otherwise you overwhelm yourself. But you look at that, you try to find the explanation for that, and you can't just be satisfied because you've gone one level up, right? You need then some explanation for that interaction causing it. If you say that that's not the final, that's not the principal influence, right?
How about if I say that actually they are not really connected?
Mm-hmm.
So because the assumption of chain is saying that like the train. So this wagon is connected to this wagon is connected to this wagon, but there must be a, what's it, locomotive? Engine at the very end. Instead of going that, how about is this wagon being dragged by this wagon? If I ask this question, practically speaking, what that means is generally our intuition says that I exist this moment because I was existing the previous moment. So is it that previous moment's me is inevitably causing me in the next moment? Is there a connection between them? Connection in the sense that previous one explains next moment. So if it cannot, then I don't need to go all the way to the beginning of time or Big Bang, whatever. This is what I'm trying to see.
So you're trying to then break that chain and saying that we don't exactly know the influence of one on the other. Well, then you have to come up with some explanation for this thing existing, unless if you say things are spontaneous and they have no explanation, right? Which is defamatory to the argument. So, or to the conversation. So to say that this is not directly influencing this, then what is, right? So you're saying rather than look at a chain, look at a phenomenon, right? And find some explanation for that phenomenon. Well, then that becomes the new chain, right? Otherwise, we're just looking at single instances, single phenomena, and not linking them in any way. So we can say that the whatever wagon is not pulling the next wagon, and just look at this wagon. But then what are we asking? So what causes the wagon? And then you have to go back.
Yeah, right? So I'm looking for this relation between the previous wagon and this wagon. So this is being pulled. Mm-hmm. My question is it this wagon that's being pulling it or not? This is the question. So still, there's a change. And based on this change, I am questioning how come that this is changing? How come that this is coming into being? So is it coming into being because the previous one was pushing it, or it's not being pushed by this, it's not being pulled by this, but still it's being pushed or pulled. So what does this action?
Yeah, so you asked two questions. You said, so if this is not pulling it, what's causing it? And then you said, what does this action? So we're still looking for a cause within this phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you find that cause to be is then the next wagon. You see what I'm saying? So just by the act of trying to understand a phenomenon, to understand some interaction, you have to look for the cause, and you are looking for the cause, right? You said, what does this action, right? When you look for that cause, that becomes the wagon. Whether you want to ignore this wagon and say that we don't know if this is necessarily causing it, and look at it in isolation, then you come up with a new answer. Whether it's that original wagon you thought or it's some other wagon, you're inevitably going back to the chain. Does that make sense?
But if the answer that I find is going to be an answer which is, by definition, going to be not a wagon, but like an engine, then there's no more chain.
Yeah.
As if, so to conceptualize it, as if the existence is in this two-dimensional plane, and everything is, I am imagining, to be connected to each other by some strings with respect to each other, pulling and pushing each other. But what I'm saying is, maybe, what if there is no string between any of them, and every string is directly connected to some top, a third dimension. So conceptually speaking, I guess this would be the way to explain it. What would that mean is, like in a cartoon, just to give an intuition. In a cartoon, I can argue that, like, let's say Bugs Bunny has this hammer and hitting the hammer to the glass, and the glass is broken. So either I'm going to say that now I'm checking the previous frame, next frame. In this frame, glass was intact. In that frame, just the next one, the glass is broken. So in between the two, the difference is in here, the hammer didn't hit it yet. In here, the hammer is hitting it. So what break the hammer? Is it the what break the glass? Is it the hammer break the glass, or the glass broken by itself, or like the previous frame made it to next frame, or every frame is directly drawn independently. So there's no causal relation between the two frames, but every frame is being drawn independently. But to be able to say that, I need to say first, because this is an alternative explanation for sure, I need to say that there is no necessary relation between the previous frame and next frame. If I can show that, and actually taking it one step further, the previous frame can in no way give existence to next frame, then the only satisfactory answer remains saying that, but there has to be a causer for that. But it's not the previous frame, it's not the next frame, then what? So if I can eliminate all possible explanations within the existence, then the only remaining answer is there has to have a being, but it is unlike anything in here, or out of space, out of time, out of shape, color, smell, size, anything, which would be called absolute maker.
Yeah. So I see. I mean, that's what I was saying with the law, right? That there has to be some external thing causing them all. The only difference I see between this argument and the one that I was putting forth was that if you're thinking about a bunch of phenomena kind of stringed up to one thing, it's whether or not those phenomena are then interdependent, and whether or not then those interdependencies are then dependent upon the absolute, right? And so with the explanation of a law, it's that the law is dictating because this happens, and so that it's dependent on everything. Whereas you're saying that as a creator that's absolutely competent over all things, and that does not need any information about these dependencies or these interactions between other things. Mm-hmm. So you're still getting. I really like what you said, that it's not that maybe it's not linked to a wagon, but then the engine itself. But you're still coming up with something, right? A causer, right?
I had to.
Yeah, you have to, exactly. But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So when you look at each phenomenon in isolation, like.
So the difference though is.
Yeah, that
it's not in the same level.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, because the wagon is being pulled like this. So that's why I said it is as if a horizontal string now, because vertical string. Otherwise, we would have this horizontal relations between, let's say, photon and glass and hammer. So each of these are in the horizontal level connected to each other. Mm-hmm. So the question is there such a horizontal relation really? Is it able to do that? So this ability part that we are questioning.
Yeah. So that, I guess, goes back to what I was saying about that these dependencies, these links between each other, is what we've come to understand the world to be, so that we can act one with the other and expect a third outcome, right? That we can be the first link, initiate the second, and expect the third. Mm-hmm. When in reality, these are all dependent, right? That's what I hope.
Yeah, but then we can ask. So if there is no real horizontal relation, then why do I perceive it? This is a secondary question to come for sure. Mm-hmm. But in the first place, do they really have any real action between the two, any relationship between the two in terms of one giving existence to other? Or if it's not giving existence, then Quran's claim makes sense. Mm-hmm. Everything is being under his control directly. It's not like everything is related to each other and there's somebody who is pulling the string from the very beginning so that everything is just following each other. So this is why we were practicing through the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. In his story, actually his two stories are very relevant in here. Because in the first story, when he says he's asking for his sustainer, because he realizes that something is going on in this body, but I'm not doing it. So, and human logic, basic human logic says, if there is an action, there has to be a doer. So in that level, it's my perception that there needs to be a cause. But what is this cause? Then he says it must be a star. Then the star sets. Then he sees a moon, but the moon sets. He sees a sun, this is large, still it sets. But there's something wrong with setting. Because if it sets, then that means it's distant, it's gone. Yet I am still being functioned. So I am in need of something which can oversee me 24/7, every single moment. So this is how he says, I discard them from being my maker. So the maker of this existence needs to be something which is always there 24/7. And he looks, there's nothing 24/7 around me. But still, there must be someone who is taking care of me 24/7. So that one that takes care of me constantly mustn't be like this wall. He must be unlike this computer, so not like anything. So this is why Quran's way of summarizing it is, there is no God but God. So you negate all the things from being the causer. You say it cannot be this, it cannot be that. So negation part. So after the negation part finishes, say, okay, now the existence finished for being the causer. Then you say, but there must be someone. This is why Islamic theologians, Islamic philosophers named it as necessarily existent one.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary to happen, exist. Such a thing, such a one has to exist based on my experience in the existence. But at the same time, he or it must be unlike anything that I experience. Because if it was something like this, I would say this is God. The reason that I said he must be unlike anything, because I couldn't see the qualities for this in this to give existence. So therefore, he is unlike anything. So this is why what I understand from God being absolute, unlike, undefinable, no color, no shape, as we were speaking before, no taste, no smell, no size. Even when we say God is merciful. So when you say your mom is merciful, you imagine something of mercy. So not even any shape of mercy that you can imagine in this case, because there would be again something within existence. So this is what I understand. And the other example was again interesting that we went through. Again about this causality. So we keep repeating this a lot. Sorry for repetition.
No.
So in the story of Ibrahim, he breaks all the idols because his people were idol worshippers. But then he leaves the big idol intact. And we are just adding a little bit to the story. He goes and puts the axe, the hammer, to the neck of the idol. And he leaves the scene. So those people come back and they see that all the idols are shattered. And they say, who did this to our gods? They say, call this kid. He was making fun of our gods. Maybe he knows. But they say, who did this? And he points to the big idol. So they turn back to themselves and say that, you know that these cannot talk, cannot do that. They're not alive. Then Ibrahim says, then how come you worship? So in here, again, the idea is there needs to be a cause. People agree with that because there's a change. Idols were intact before, and now they are shattered. So either they need to break by themselves, or it needs to be a wind, or it needs to be an animal, or something. There needs to be a cause that made it. But then there, let's assume it's a protected area, no animal, no nothing, no wind. But then Ibrahim is pointing to the large idol, saying that maybe it did it. So yeah, okay, for breaking idols, you need a hammer, but you also need will, you also need power, you need knowledge how to use hammer. You need to be angry with gods, whatever, those idols. The large idol doesn't have any of these, so it doesn't satisfy. The requirements are not being met. So likewise, when we say, for instance, you happen to be like this because of your DNA. So as if in this line of thought, we are putting the hammer to the neck of DNA in our day-to-day conversation. So does DNA have the capacity to make me or give me existence? I need to ask such a question. So I guess this is a more relevant version of the story for today's life. So if I see that, well, DNA is like a book, like it's knowledge, but knowledge is not sufficient by itself. So what acts? So if, for example, in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we also put a how to break idols handbook to the pocket of the idol, would it satisfy or convince the people to say that, well, the idol has even the handbook, see? So he must be knowing, it must be knowing how to break idols. So in this sense, for example, the connection between DNA and cell replication, or DNA and child growing up. So if we can cut this, because it doesn't satisfy the requirements of making a human, making a living being, then we said, okay, if it's not DNA, if it's not this, if it's not that, if it's not clouds, if it's not earth, sun, then what? So once I discard all such possibilities out there, there remains La ilaha, this is not God, this is not God, this is not God. There remains only one option, saying that there has to be a causer, a doer, a maker. So the maker must be not of type of this existence. So this was, and then everything is or must be, not is, everything must be under his control directly, not through a chain, not through a secondary cause or law, whatever, but each and every moment, as if, like the cartoon example, the tip of the pen is writing every single text or drawing every single figure. It says how everything is under his control. This is what we were trying to come up with since the beginning. Alhamdulillah. Good. And in today's part that I was trying to so the last page, we can read from the last page. Moreover, so it's in the third page. Yeah. So, yeah, Abdurrahman, let's listen to it from you. Can you read moreover, yeah.
Moreover, in all particles are two further truthful witnesses to the Maker's necessary existence and unity. One is that together with their absolute impotence, they all perform most important and various duties. The other is that despite their lifelessness, they all conform to a universal order and systems, thus displaying a universal consciousness. That is to say, through the tongue of its impotence, each particle testifies to the necessary existence of the absolutely powerful one, and through its conforming to the order in the world, each testifies to his unity.
Okay. Any comments about this one? In the previous parts, we have been discussing the movements of particles and how every particle, by moving within an order, according to an order, points to a necessarily existent one who is directly controlling each and everything. Now he is talking about two further points. It says that each particle, by its movement, is a witness to Maker's necessary existence and also to the unity of the Maker. What do you think? Yeah, Abdurrahman is thinking.
I think it goes back somewhat to kind of what we were saying in terms of the unity, that there has to be something that overrides any particle's kind of will or desire that decides between the interaction of the two. And I guess with their impotence, it's just saying that because none can be effectors themselves, they must rely on some sort of. So it's twofold. I would say. So I feel like that they're kind of trying to present this as two different lines of evidence, both of which point to the existence of an absolutely powerful one. I would say you actually need to take them in conjunction together to arrive at that conclusion, and they don't stand independent. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you feel otherwise?
So from two different aspects, he's arriving to. So from one aspect, he arrives to the conclusion that such a one must exist. From another angle, he says that this other aspect is showing that he is one and only.
Mm-hmm.
So still we are talking about the same entity at the end, or same cause, but from different angles. So one is pointing to this aspect, the other one is pointing to that aspect.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. Because the first one could point to some sort of law, some sort of force causing, or some sort of force, causing all of them. And the second one, like you said, is has to point to. I feel like the first one, it's just saying that the particles can't act on themselves. It has to be something influencing them. That to me doesn't arrive to the existence of a creator until you get to the point of, or something unified, right? Until you get to the point that, okay, all of them are acting together. There must be some sort of consensus, some sort of absolutely powerful one. The second one's a stronger point for me than the first, but I feel like you can even take both of them together.
So for the first one, though, he uses the term absolute impotence. What does this imply? Absolute impotence of a particle.
I'll take the second one. You do this first.
Absolute impotence of the particle means that the particle itself has no ability to move or react or interact. So it's saying that there's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah. And since, again, not taking it in isolation, so the particle moving in here is, because if we just take it in the horizontal level as we used to, so there's this perfect relationship between every particle, so many interactions happening up there, but this particle itself it's beyond the capacity and knowledge of this particle to controlling everything out there. So it's absolutely impotent, yet the effect that is coming out of this movement of this particle is immense, so very huge. What does this mean? Something very weak, as if is leading to so much of a infinitely beautiful results. So that means it's not by itself. There must be someone who is beyond everything, is moving this particle as well. Otherwise, I cannot attribute it to the particle. But it's incapable. How about the second one?
The second one I was thinking about, like, how do we conclude this universal consciousness? Like, is it because we witness a pattern and that things aren't happening randomly? Things are following a conscious choice? Is that how we conclude that? Like, we see that things happen with a purpose. I mean, when I look at my experience, I can definitely see it. But like, let's say I'm not looking from my perspective, just looking at the universe.
Mhm.
Okay,
So with whose perspective you would like to look at?
just the existence of nature's perspective.
So are you going to borrow somebody else's logic or what?
No, like if I look at my life, I can see a conscious will is acting. Like things are happening with purpose.
Mhm.
I'm trying to see if I can come to the conclusion of universal consciousness by witnessing the pattern in nature.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, the stars, the galaxies, how particles are moving. Can I witness the consciousness there? Is it because we see a pattern?
So for example, I'm trying to understand, when you see a cat, do you observe conscious choices in the being of cat?
Of course, because it's a cat. And it
It's
has
a,
to be consciously made a cat.
it's a living organism. So every particle in the body of this cat, let's say there is a certain pattern in the fur of the cat. Because every cat has a different pattern of
Like there's
fur.
nothing that mandates that it has to exist like that for sure, like guaranteed, or it's obligatory that it must exist that way. So there's a will that created it. Like we concluded that way.
And you see that there is a certain order that keeps it alive. So it's not like a random being, but it's a wise choices has been made and is being made for the cat to live. And the cat is just part of the picture. It's not that in the isolation, in the vacuum, cat is not living like this, but cat is living with the milk, with the water, with the clouds, with the sun, with the solar system with the other systems, whatever. Everything is like related to each other as such. So the conscious choice that is being made for a cat's fur to be black in here and white over there, or the internal organs, whatever about the cat, because if Tesla requires conscious choices to make this car, cat is requiring much more conscious choices being made every single moment because it's a constantly changing organism, unlike Tesla. I mean, it's a beautiful car, you make it once, but it runs for a few years without, let's say, maintenance. But the cat's body, as if you constantly change the bits and pieces of this machinery. So a lot of choices are being made. It's growing from baby to an adult cat. So all these conscious choices, not independent of the rest of the existence, requires a universal consciousness to be acting for making a single choice over the cat. However, whoever is making the cat as it is must be aware of and also doing the rest of the choices out there, because the particle cannot do it. I mean, the cat consisting of particles, either we will say that every particle in the body of this cat is so conscious that everything else is doing so that it takes a proper position, or who is aware of everything is consciously moving this particle from here to there in the cat's body.
Is the unity? He says unity. Is that like what's the Arabic for that? Is that ahadi or is it wahidi?
So this is wahid, I guess.
We were talking about patterns. Are you understanding unity as like patterns?
Wahdat.
No, patterns I understand as Allah's sunnah, like his sunnah.
Yeah. But do you need patterns to
See consciousness? Or how else would I?
So like just the fact that like the universe moves from one frame to the next, right? Means that for every interaction there has to be a decision that's made, right? There has to be some. If I want to do one thing and you want to do another, and what we need to come to a decision to make it happen.
Yeah.
And we have no agreement. We're just going to keep talking, and there's nothing's going to happen. Right? So there needs to be some competency over us. Him, for example, to say, "Stop talking. You're going to do this. You're going to do that, or you're going to do neither of those." For it to move forward. That's my understanding.
So just the fact that there's change shows that consciousness exists.
Yeah.
Because that's what we witness in existence as well. Do we? I mean,
So-
yeah.
So, for example, if the change was totally random,
Yeah,
then it would
be
make
hard.
things tougher. Still, for two things to happen either this way or that way, equally likely things being happening either this way or that way still requires a chooser for sure. So even if anything is moving, even if it was random, we would say that there has to be a chooser. But what is complicating the case in here is this movement. So it might have been that, I mean, the case would be much tougher. But if it was as such, one might have argued that the particle, it doesn't have universal knowledge. It only knows making this sort of a movement, let's say, or that. And then every particle as such, this is why there is no order, there is nothing in the existence, it's all chaos, it's all particles randomly moving all over the place. But this is not how we experience the existence. So every particle is making a conscious choice, conscious in the sense that trying to preserve a pattern, trying to preserve an order. This is why every particle needs to know everything in the existence and act accordingly. Because it shouldn't be breaking the order. The order is so minute that, for example, in the larger scale, if we take a baseball bat and hit the sun, like a large one, so then everything is going to get messed up for the solar system. So more or less you can imagine that how the things are happening minute, because in the larger scale of the galaxies, whatever, sun is just a dust. So, but you see that things are so much interlinked in this existence. Now, consider yourself a particle in your eye or your eye. So if I take your eye out of your body or take your heart out of your body, things are starting to get rotten. So things are connected to each other and requires for you to exist as you are, the choices need to be made wisely, knowingly, consciously. And I'm using consciousness in this sense. So, and since everything is so much intermingled, moving one requires the knowledge of everything else. So then either I will say that every particle has infinitely many knowledge, unbounded knowledge, unbounded knowledge as much as the existence, or it knows nothing, but there, because this is the manifestation that I observed. One example that we were giving last week was after the rain, you come out to the outside and you see that water droplets everywhere is small reflections of sun. So either, now you're trying to explain the phenomena, either you will say that there's a small, minute sun in every single one of them, but as an exact sun, all the qualities, with all its qualities. Or you will say that, if you pay attention carefully, is the early sun over there? Or you will say that, no, this is not sun. They are all coming from a single sun, but they are just reflections of the same sun. So when we look at the movement of particles, you observe that to move this particle, the knowledge required to move this particle from here to here is equal to governing the whole universe. Every particle is reflecting the infinite knowledge, if you like. Then either I will attribute this knowledge to every single particle. I will say that every water droplet has a sun in it. But if I explore it from close and I see that it's not really the case, it cannot, because then they will contradict each other, as you were saying, then I would say there has to exist a sun which is not here, but everything is a reflection of this sun. So this particle is reflecting or manifesting the knowledge of an absolute one, absolutely knowledgeable one. So with its impotence, it shows the existence of it, and through conforming to the order in the world, it shows the unity, oneness. The maker is one and only. It's not that multiple entities are taking care of this existence.
Yeah. So we see a will in existence, and then maybe it's off topic, but can we also conclude that we see a personality? We see a one. I guess think of the word fed. Yeah. could we say that in the creation we witness some type of personality which also points to just one?
So I guess for this,
Because there's a consciousness and there's a type of consciousness, maybe.
yeah, this personality part is, I guess it will come into the picture when I start questioning what is the relation of this one with me, because I am also given this feeling of oneness within me. I am experiencing, for example, I consist of billions of particles. But when you say me, who are you? I will tell you I am Yusuf. As if when I say I'm not feeling like I am consisting of infinitely many particles. I am one. Like a single personality that I can communicate. When I say I'm imagining it or I'm feeling a single entity. I guess then when I now question, how about this existence, the existing one, the maker, the absolute one, how can I relate with that? How can I communicate with that being? Because as I speak about that being as absolute, it becomes so inaccessible for me, so unreal, so distant. So how can I form a relation? Is it like a totally abstract concept? Or is it an existing entity? I cannot give shape or form, but yet an entity out there with which I can communicate, with whom I can feel its existence, as if, for example, let's say you are sad and you call your mom, and the existence, knowing the existence of your mom gives you some sort of a satisfaction, although she might be like 2 hours away or 10 hours flight away, whatever. So this sort of a relationship is different than saying, coming up with a conclusion, saying that theoretically my mom should exist. And there's a difference between the two. So I guess this is where maybe this existing entities with respect to me, how do I relate to him, is where we will start a discussion of what you are now mentioning. Because I guess at that moment for now, we are more questioning, the way I feel it, is how does this existence exist? What is the maker of it? Because otherwise what's happening is there are a lot of agents out there, possible agents. None of them are as if I need to go and beg from them, ask from them to give me something. This discussion right now is saving me from that burden. I don't have to beg from them. Okay, so the next part is about Ahad and Samad. So the author is claiming that every particle is also recites Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad. So would you like to read that part?
Just as every particle testifies in two ways to his being the necessarily existent one of unity, so to every living being are the two signs that he is the single and eternal Basad, Ahad and Samad.
Let's keep reading.
Yes, on all living beings are a seal of divine oneness, Ahad, the stamp of eternal Basadness, Samad. For each displays together the mirror of its being most of the divine names, the manifestation of which are apparent in the universe. Quite simply, like a point of focus, each displays the manifestation of the greatest name of the ever-living and self-subsisting. Thus, since it shows a sort of shadow of the oneness of the divine essence under the veil of the name of the giver of life, it bears a stamp of divine oneness.
So is this part clear about Ahad? Because Ahad is different than Wahid. In the previous part, he was talking about wahid. Now he's talking about ahad. You see the difference?
Yeah, so Wahid would be like coherence or like cohesion, right? Like consistency.
Mhm.
And Ahad is like divinity, absolute rule over, or like singular. Actually, yeah, singular.
Singular?
Like singularity. So like Wahid would be like an oligarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not an oligarchy. But it's like not necessarily like it does not necessitate the absence of plurality. So it's like,
So in the previous part, as if he was still saying that whoever is running this must be running everything. So still it was saying that the ruler must be one. But in that, in ahad, for each displays together in the mirror of its being most of the divine names. So as if every single particle, to move it from here to there, as if it requires all the qualities that is being manifest everywhere else. So, for example, it's going to be a very bad example. You come to a house and you see that things are ordered. So food is cooked and the laundry is washed clean. And then the windows are also wiped and clean. So you might say that, again, this is a very bad example, assuming that everything is intermingled, whatever. You might say that whoever has cleaned the window must be the one who cooked the dinner. I mean, as I said, horrible example, but let's assume this is the case. In this case, now you are saying that doer of this action requires that he or she is doing all the actions. So doer is one because the actions are so much interconnected. Ahad, on the other hand, is something like when you look at cleaning of window, you see that all the qualities that are manifest in the cooking is also somehow reflected on the cleaning of window. If only I had a better example.
Actually,
So, I mean, going with the metaphor of sun and the colors of sun, let's say you see that there's this certain color, purple. So you look to a huge garden, all different flowers. You see that there's this purple color over here. And you see that wherever this purple color is coming from, you see that there's green and then yellow and then orange. You see all of them, you look all of them and see how they are together. You see that all of them must be coming from a single source because of the harmony of the colors and the way that you observe the colors are being manifest. You say that all these different colors are actually coming from a single source. This is wahid. Because he said that every particle is moving in a way, so this moves and then the other one moves. You say that whoever is moving this particle must be moving that particle as well. But when it comes to ahad, it is saying that in the metaphor, when you look at a water droplet, not the flowers this time, you see all the colors of sun in a single spot. So all the divine names are being manifest in every single spot. So for moving a single particle from here to there requires that the mover must also be merciful. The mover must also be provider. Because moving this particle from here to there needs that this cat over there to be mercifully treated. Or that the clouds, because this particle and the clouds are related. So then you say that sustenance is being observed. It must also be a sustainer. So every single action in the existence becomes like a stamp, and looking at it, you see all the qualities of the maker in every single spot, not part of it. In the previous example, I was only observing purple color in the flower. Now he's saying that every particle actually also shows that the maker is also provider, also sustainer, also lover, also caretaker, all the names that you can observe. Every particle points to that as well.
Is this like so a few weeks ago we were talking about a king who had amazing wealth. And if I see this wealth, then I'm like, this can only be the king's wealth. Like if I see a lot of wealth somewhere, I'm like, there's only the king's wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And I go somewhere else and I also see something amazingly built. And I'm like, only the king could have done this. It's one sign. However, they were saying that maybe someone else would come along and say, no, this house I actually built it myself or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could like taint the waters maybe. But then, so that would be wahid, right? So seeing that the wealth points to the king. I'm understanding that to be wahid, because like you know for sure that only one person could do that. Like the king could build such a thing, but it's still not so clear instantly. Like
it requires you to analyze the whole picture.
Yeah, and then what we were saying later, that everything has a stamp on it, and that would be it makes it a lot easier to realize.
Yeah, ahad is making it much easier. Yeah, because you observe that whichever sample you pick, there's a signature on it, a stamp on it. So this is, and for particle, he said that quite simply like a point of focus, each displays the manifestation of the greatest name of ever living and self-subsistent one, Hayy al-Qayyum. Every particle is pointing to those names, because life, giving of life is such a central point. When you observe life, you observe sustenance, you observe caring, a lot of things. Life is pretty much like in the metaphor is like this water droplet. Because life comes as a package. A lot of things are being reflected over life. Even if you pick a single fly, this fly is being taken care of with the oxygen, with the water, with the sunlight, with the food that it needs, with these wings, perfect machinery and everything, just within the life of a single fly. So by looking at the fly, you can talk up just saying that who is the maker of this? Just looking at it, a fly, of course, with its relation to the rest of the existence, you would come up with almost the same list when you look at yourself. Because the things that are required to make a fly is required, the same names are being manifest in human as well. Because life is such a comprehensive focal point. Okay, and the summit part, and since, would you like to read? Okay.
And since the living being is like a miniature sample of the universe and a fruit of the tree of creation, it shows a seal of divine eternal besottedness, summit, which conveys altogether with ease to the tiny sphere of its life the tiny sphere of its life it needs, which are as many as the universe. No. Its needs, which are as many as the universe. That is to say, this shows it has a sustainer whose regard and favor take the place of all things. Everything in existence cannot take the place of his regard. Furthermore, the situation shows that its sustainer is in need of nothing, nor does anything diminish his treasury, and nor is anything at all difficult for his power. This, then, is a sort of seal of eternal besottedness, summit. Thus, on every living being are a real seal of divine oneness, Ahad, and stamp of eternal besottedness, Samad. Yes, through the tongue of its life, every living being recites Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad. Say he is God, the one, the eternally besought.
So this Samad part, is it clear? How everything recites Samad? Again, we can take a simple example of a fly. This fly is in need of so many things to survive, and it is being provided constantly. So its provider shouldn't be in need of anything, because otherwise we go with the chain again, which doesn't make any sense. So the fly, by its neediness and its need being provided, so many, many needs, because the fly needs the universe to exist, for the fly to exist. And those needs being provided says that my provider, I am in need of that provider, and that provider is in need of nothing.
So, our neediness is what is constantly reciting the Samad.
Our neediness, yet being provided.
Samad also includes being provided.
I am being provided. So, because Samad is, my provider is not in, there has to be a provider which is not in need of anything, yet everything is in need of him. That's what Samad means. And this is how I experience myself. I am in need of the existence, and my provider is the one, must be the one who is not in need of anything, and everything else is in need of him. By that, Allahu Samad.
So Ahad and Samad, they're very connected. They must be connected.
Yeah. Ahad is in every living being. You observe all the manifestations of names. And in Samad, everything is in need of him, but he is in need of nothing. Otherwise, he cannot provide.
So someone once told me that all the names of the Creator, all the attributes of the Creator have all of his other attributes within him. So for example, his mercy has justice and his justice has mercy. So how would you see Ahad and Samad and Ahad?
Yeah. What do you think? You have an answer for that? It's a
I'm
good
trying to think
question.
of it.
And Samad. Yeah, good question.
So I guess maybe this could be wrong, but seeing Ahad and Samad, I could think of it as like you said that he is in need of nothing. That's Samad, and he is the provider of all. So everything is dependent upon him, and him alone. That could be Ahad, right? And he needs nothing else. He is one alone, and he is alone in that regard. That he is dependent upon nothing. Everything else is dependent on something, namely him. So because he's dependent on nothing, that in itself is Samad, that he's dependent upon nothing. But because he's dependent on nothing, and that's a unique attribute that can be Ahad. I don't know. Well,
The way I think about Ahad was maybe still thinking it in terms of existence, observing everything in a single, in every of his existence or his actions.
Mm-hmm.
So he manifests there, and I observe his manifestation in every life, living being.
So in that he gives all. So Samad, he is a provider of all, right? And now how in all of us, you see. Or no, that's
In a single being,
yeah. I'm not so. Yeah, in a single being.
with all his names he is manifesting. Yeah, we need to think about it, I guess. Okay. Yeah, so this concludes our text. Just last two sentences I'm reading. In addition to these two seals are several more important windows, but since they have been explained in detail in other places, our discussion here has been brief. Seeing that each particle in existence at once open up three windows and two openings unto the unity of necessarily existent, and life too opens two doors, the last two that we read, Ahad and Samad. You can compare how all the levels of beings from particles to the sun spread the light of knowledge of all glorious one. Thus, you can understand from this the degrees of progress in knowledge of God and the levels of awareness of his presence. So, by this, for this week, inshallah, we are concluding that everything is under his control. Next week, we will talk about causal relations. So how does this, say, apple tree gives us apple, our famous example. So can we cut the connection between apple and apple tree, or is it the apple tree is causing, apple is being caused by apple tree is being caused by seed is being caused by apple. So causal, is this such a chain, or actually there is no direct relation between apple and apple tree? And this will be for next week, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.